is your end of day market recap for Monday, October 20th. Happy Monday, everybody. Hope everybody had a great weekend and hope everybody had a good trading day today. Before we get into all the market moves today, risk disclaimer in front of you. Everything that we're going through is for information purpose, only not giving out any advice or recommendations. Please read the full risk disclaimer there. Also, I thought today was kind of very nice to see, like, the gap up and follow through for the first, about half hour of the day. I didn't think today was like a lot of opportunities to do a lot of intraday type trades, day trades, that probably many of you do. I thought it was just, good outperformance. And sometimes, that's the way it is. Sometimes things are a bit boring because we didn't really have much movement after 10:30. But overall, there were some good moves. So I will go over those, and I'll go over some of the names that I'm watching, as well as the indices. But I just want to talk about too what you guys probably experience, or what you may have experienced today, which I saw some trading platforms, other systems that I use were down because of the outage, the AWS outage. And this is one of the things that I don't cover in the end of day videos. Cover a little bit more with members, but technology, we kind of take it for granted a little bit. As traders, we need technology. Now, I know over time, technology has really gotten better. From the time that I was a retail trader, which was long time ago, and then I was an institutional trader for a number of years at Merrill Lynch, Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, and that's one of the things that with the trading. The technology, number one, is that it vastly improved from before I was an institutional trader till afterwards for a retail trader. So that's a good thing. But I would say even this, when I was an institutional trader, we would still have outages from time to time. Now there weren't really server outages. They would mainly be because our technology team was doing like an upgrade over the weekend, and you'd come in on Monday and nothing would work because of the upgrade. I'm sure many of you probably have experienced that, when your technology team tells you that they're doing an upgrade, and then you come in and nothing works. So we used to safeguard against that. We said, hey, whenever you're running an upgrade, or in fact at any time, I want you to have some ability to make sure all systems are going. Now, we don't have that luxury when we're retail traders. We don't have a dedicated tech team, but there are things that you can kind of safeguard against when your brokerage, which one you use, has an outage. And I've experienced that before. Thankfully, knock on wood, the brokerage that I use doesn't have that many outages anymore. They used to about 3 or 4 years ago, but it's also a function of high volume. Right, they used to happen back in 2021 quite frequently because systems were getting jammed with all the option flow. The systems back then weren't upgraded, I think, to where they are now. So where am I getting? What's the point of all this? The point is, you can't control when some of these outages happen, whether it's brokerage specific, or if it's something like a server, like AWS. What you can do is diversify your accounts a little bit. And I used to do this. I still do this. Thankfully, I haven't needed to do it in a while, but you should be able to, if one of your systems isn't working, you should have a backup. And that's important. And if you don't want to have that, if you don't want to have a backup system, then you just kind of have to understand that maybe you won't be trading that day, and you go out and you feed the ducks, as I say. Those are the choices, and it is something that you just have to deal with as a trader. And you kind of have to keep your cool. I saw a lot of traders losing their cool today, when this was down, and I get it. It's not fun, but we've all been there, and the more that you can kind of prepare for these things ahead of time, have a little bit of a contingency plan, the better that you're going to be. So I just thought I'd mention that on a slow day. Just make sure if I switch this. There we go. I'm just going to switch so that you can see the spreadsheet. So what happened today? Well, we had a nice gap up today, and we had some continuation once the market opened. Like I said, it was really the first like 45 minutes of the day. Qs were up 1.3%. Small caps outperformed. They were up 1.9. Look at the micro caps come back again. Remember, those kind of got hit pretty hard last week. Again, it was kind of weird because we saw both IWM and IWC, small caps and micro caps, both break out to new highs. And then they kind of got slammed down on the whole financial thing that happened last week. Bitcoin and gold very strong. I mentioned that, especially I talked about this in the weekend member video. Some really good levels to trade off of for Bitcoin. I'll bring that up. China was one thing that actually got going. That was China was actually underperforming in the beginning of the day, but I think perhaps Trump talking about China helping that group today. Um, sorry, apologize for sneezing. But banks were your one of your best performers, as I really thought. Again, we never know for sure, but I really thought that that was a more of an overreaction. After all, we've gotten some bank earnings that have been really good. A couple of these smaller banks mentioned that they had $50 million write downs, which is nothing for a situation. I mean, the worry is always that there's more of these things out there, and maybe there are more $50 million losses that are coming. These are not big amounts to deal with at all. But you know, the part of the problem, I'll say, with the banks too, is everyone or most people still have in the back of their mind how bad 2008, uh, 2007, 2009 was, right? That scarred people. So when they hear about loss write downs, right, their mind automatically goes to that and they think, oh my God, this could be another 2008, right? And then it takes a little time to say, wait a minute, nah, it's it's probably not, but it scares you for a second and you have those battle scars. And I think that's kind of the situation why some of these things, why there's a bit of an overreaction to the downside. But it's nice to see the banks come back today up 2.3%. I'll try to go over a couple of financials. I mean, at metals and mining, I mean, this has been the leader of this year. The leading group this year up another 4.9%. Just an amazing move in the metals and mining space once again. Clean energy put in another good day, up 3.7%. Cryptos did very well today. They were also the ETF that I look at was up 3.3%. Silver miners also did very well again today. So let's dive into some charts. I'm going to start really quickly with the indices. Let me just replace here. All right. So SPY, right? I will cover this really quickly, or at least I'll try to. But last week we had a lot of difficulty with the top of the October value area, 667.24. Yeah, we're not at new highs yet, but this is good progress. And I really think a couple times I said this last week, when you have a big red bar like this, sometimes it takes some backing and filling and exploring some sides of the range before you can kind of recover from that, regardless of like what the reason was for that move. It just is it's kind of what I said last week was this is kind of like an earthquake, and a couple of these were like the aftershocks. That's the best way that I can kind of describe it. That you're going to have some aftershocks after a big move like you had like that. Qs actually made it back. That's very close to a new closing high. They were showing some relative strength last week. I think really the Mag 7 names had done very well. I'll bring up a spreadsheet with that in just a second. We did not, I mean, we're right back at those new highs. So, yeah, I mean, either we're going to get rejected here, maybe we come back to this VPOC. I thought that we would kind of hold in here, right, at this VPOC from last week, right, this point of control that wasn't touched. We did that with SPY, by the way. I think SPY is still hovering right around there, right? Bang, like right into here. But Qs have been stronger, relative strength, and they got above there. But I wouldn't be surprised if they check back a little bit. IWM is right at the top of the value area for the week. Remember, this value area that we're looking at right here with with 248.29 is, and the bottom of value down at 241.39 is based on all last week's activity. So we're still in that range of last week with roughly one standard deviation. of that price action, of that all that activity from last week. So let's see if we do get a significant break higher there. That's small caps. So couple things for today. Well, I mentioned Bitcoin. We might as well go through some of these movers. Yeah, I mean, here's your VPOC reversal. Now I mentioned this is still difficult, right? You got, like, this is a nice move today. This was a 4% move. Does it get us anywhere? No, it just gets us back into the range. But there was demand here, and that's what these VPOCs often signal, is that we have some demand there, possible demand area. And I went through this, tweeted those out, both I think both Ethereum and Bitcoin. But here's also Ethereum. I came in here, took out a VPOC. It is a great space to try a trade, because usually there's demand there. Just as we see when there's the VPOCs with overhead, that's usually overhead supply. Or down here, it's usually a possible demand area, and this was up 4% as well. So, you know, that's a nice thing. That's that's a nice trade to get something like that, because I still think this is going to be challenged. We're below the value area for the month. We're also below the 50-day moving average. Now, let's get to some single stocks. I'm just going to bring up this is the spreadsheet that I send to Tribeca Trade Group members. I don't mind sharing it, just so that you can kind of see what's going on here. Um, but you could see that this kind of looked different, where it was around like 10 o'clock in the morning. Most of these things are, so both these triggers, by the way, are based on market value, volume at price levels, pivots to basically look for triggers. You could see, like, by the way, everything that's in the gray here is from the previous week. I go through a list, that's right now 18 names. I probably got about 27 names on the list from last week. So I go through all those charts and I kind of weed them out. I take out the ones that I don't want to be watching anymore, and I add the ones that I keep, the ones that I still want to be watching for possible trade entries, or maybe they're just names I want to be watching. These are the new names that I added, and then today, just a couple names that I was watching as well today. So I'll go through some of these names, but you could see this wasn't like, this was stronger at 10 o'clock in the morning. I'm going to go through a couple of these names with you. The first one that I'm going to go over, which is a name that got a nice upgrade, or nice out. They initiated this stock at an outperform uh, last week, was JP Morgan. They gave an outperform rating to CRDO. This is nice. This is the first time that this has been back above its 20-day moving average since it made this drop in here. So that's pretty significant. I like that. It also managed to get above this VPOC. So this is one I'm definitely watching. Also note the VPOC taken out to the downside, but I like what this stock is doing now. If you're not in it yet, or you didn't trade it not yesterday, but Friday, again, this is the first time it's back above the 20-day moving average. So maybe now that's a little bit of, gives it a little bit of wind at its back. We will see. Robinhood, right? Went over this stock on Friday. Fortunately, did not close on the highs, and I'm glad that I did take two targets in this today. Up 4.5%. That's great. That's a real nice move. It held support where it needed to, and I re-added this trade on Friday. But yeah, it did not close anywhere near the highs of the day, and I did take a target at in the mid 130s, and I took a target at 140. We'll see if it could get above the 20-day moving average. That's why you take, my opinion, that's why you take targets. If it happens to kind of simmer down a little bit back in here, then I could add back one of those targets. Really, I just want to make sure it stays above 129. That's Robinhood. Micron was another name that I came in long today. I got a real nice move in this one. It was up about 4%. It was up pre-market. I ended up taking this trade off today. I like the trend here, and sometimes I'm a little bit too cute with things, taking them off when I think that they look a little bit toppy. But I'd like to see the 5-day moving average kind of catch up a little bit. I want to go over a couple sector charts. Look at the move back in XME. That's really nice. It dipped below the 5-day moving average for the first time in about 2 months. Retakes it, very strong. Also, XBI looks very good. And this was something that I think I went over last week, but probably not in crazy detail. But This barely sold off last week, right? When the whole small caps, and a lot of these names that are in this ETF, because it's an equally weighted ETF, are small cap. And this held up really well last week with IWM selling off. Now, again, most of what IWM, why it was weak, was because of the banks, but still, I really think that this biotech looks really good. If you notice, the ARC Innovation ETF outperformed today, and I was wondering what names did it. This is ARKK, was up 4.4%, almost as up as much as the metals and mining. But when you look at the movers that did the heavy lifting today, this was mainly biotech stocks. Beam was up 17. This is all in the ARC ETF. Beam was up 17%. Twist was up 16%. RXRX was up 14%. NTLA was up 13%. uh, what else? CRISPR was up 7%. At CERS was up 6.5%. So that's where this performance came from. And by the way, I like that. I do like this chart in ARC, but the biotech is really showing some nice strength. It is also, if you go back to this ETF for the day, notice it's not really fading. Right? We had some faders, like I talked about with Robinhood. Um, a few other names too. I think more so a little bit of tech faded today, but yeah. Um, but overall, biotech has kind of remained pretty strong, and I think it's mainly a combination of drug studies as well as small deals that we've been seeing. There's been some takeout deals. One name that was not green today. I thought the Mag Seven names were pretty strong today, but one name, not Netflix. Netflix was strong, and Netflix is going to report, by the way, tomorrow. Maybe my mind's jumping ahead to that, but Nvidia ended up green. Ended up red on the day, right? It's pretty rare when the Qs are up 1.3% and Nvidia closed red. Notice it did not break back outside of the value area. Now it tried to do it, but I would watch this name. And if you like Nvidia, make sure you have an alert there at 184.51, as that's the resistance that it had to get through. But as I went over with CRDO, that was strong. AMD was strong. A few other names, and you can kind of see too the equally weighted um, semiconductor ETF was up 2.1% today. So again, there were some smaller names that did pretty well today. I mentioned some of the financials. A couple of names that I'm watching. Morgan Stanley had good earnings, right? They jumped up last week. They filled this earnings gap just barely, but it did fill. Watch this level here, 162.20 in Morgan Stanley. I'm also watching SoFi. I was long SoFi. I made some money in SoFi about I think it was about 2 weeks ago, and I sold out of it right at the top of the value area. I bought it in here on the turn, and I sold it here. Now I did not buy it again in here, but I will be watching to see if this time around it can get through the value area, because again I sold it right here, so I don't mind getting back involved here. That's SoFi. I got a couple other ones that a couple other names too. KTOS, which I may have gone over in Friday's video, also holding support. Didn't make a big move today. Would like to see it get back above that 5-day moving average, and maybe as well the 20-day moving average. But for now, it held where it needed to. NBIS is another one I'll be watching tomorrow. It did get down to the bottom of its value area, and for now, it's holding. Let's see what it does tomorrow, right around this 107.66 level. Let's see if that holds uh, and moves higher. Um, Apple had a big day today. Right. So new highs for Apple. A couple nice brokerage upgrades or price target raises in Apple. That's a new high in Apple. Last one I'm going to go over is Tesla here, which is going to, I think Tesla reports after the close tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken. Wednesday. Sorry, Wednesday. I had said this in the weekend video for members. I would really like to see a run into earnings for this name, right? Don't forget, and this is something to think about for names that are going to have their earnings report. I would rather have a name run into earnings, right? And then I can go ahead and take it off, and I don't have to worry about the unknown of the earnings report and what the reaction is going to be, right? Some traders they like the thrill of it, right? It's more or less kind of like a little bit of gambling, right? They like to be at the casino, right? I would much rather trade like a casino does, right? And if this name rallies because of buy the rumor, sell the news, which is what we see a lot of times, right? I would love to take the position, and I took a target, by the way. I've been long Tesla for a little bit, and I did take a target today. But I would love for this to break higher and run into its earnings report. Then I could take profits without dealing with the event, and then I can kind of, if I want to, if I think if it's an overreaction, maybe to the downside, then I could add back a little bit. So I think that's going to be that's going to be telling not only about Tesla that reports, but also a lot of other names that may run into the report. Remember, kind of think about things. Try not to think about things as as more or less like you've got to play the event, right? The event is unknown. You don't know what you're going to get. So for some of these things, you could just take the money, put it in your pocket.